On the eve of a 4-day strike by junior doctors in England, the NHS says it could be the most disruptive action in its history. With no resolution to the dispute about pay, there are stark warnings about the possible impact on patients.
This, in a sense, is a perfect storm in terms of the capacity of the health service. We're hearing the potential now of 350,000 cancelled appointments and operations.
We'll have the latest on the walkout. Also tonight, the mother of the British-Israeli sisters shot dead in the West Bank has died from the injuries she suffered in the attack. China carries out what it says is a mock air blockade of Taiwan, using jets carrying live ammunition. And Spain's Jon Rahm celebrates as he wins golf's Masters in Augusta, becoming the first European to win both that title and the US Open. Hello, good evening. With just hours to go until junior doctors begin a 4-day strike across England, a senior NHS leader says the health service is facing a perfect storm, with hospitals struggling to cover shifts affected by the action because staff have booked Easter breaks. Matthew Taylor of the NHS Confederation says the action, which runs from 7 o'clock tomorrow morning until 7 on Saturday morning, means 350,000 appointments or operations could be cancelled. He's called for the arbitration service, ACAS, to be brought in. There are currently no talks taking place. The British Medical Association is sticking to its 35% pay demand. The government says it won't negotiate until that demand is more reasonable, calling the BMA's stance militant. Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
I, as a doctor, don't believe doctors should strike. I think our first responsibility is to our patients.
Paul is both a doctor and a patient. He was due to have an operation on his leg last month, but it was cancelled because of the junior doctors' strike then. He's been given another date, but it's meant more weeks of discomfort and strong painkillers.
I'm unable to work, which I find very frustrating. I need help with just simple things like putting on a sock. I need assistance getting in and out of the shower. Coming up and down stairs is difficult, and I have a very limited range for being able to walk.
Camilla loves sailing and hiking, but that's been limited by a knee condition which needs an operation.
To be told 72 hours before the operation.
She doesn't want to criticise the junior doctors. Her op's been postponed twice because of the strike action in England, and she says that's highly inconvenient.
It messed about me, it messed about my employer, it messed about my husband, and it messed about his employer.
The strike begins at 7 a.m. tomorrow and continues till 7 a.m. on Saturday. Senior health representatives say it'll have the biggest impact yet in the long-running NHS pay dispute.
And not only is the action longer, it's 4 days, but it's sandwiched between the Easter oncology weekend and another weekend. It's a time where many people will have, consultants will have booked holiday. We have Ramadan, we have Passover as well. So this, in a sense, is a perfect storm in terms of the capacity of the health service.
Hi Sandra, how are you getting on? Looks like a busy afternoon.
Here at one of England's biggest hospital trusts, they've had to cancel or rearrange thousands of outpatient appointments and more than 3/4 of planned operations and procedures.
I think there is anxiety across all of the clinical professions.
The medical director told me there were serious concerns about the impact on patients.
I think everyone is working very hard to make sure that all of our rotas are covered and all of our services are as safe as they could possibly be. It's very difficult to be absolutely certain that in any group of patients who are seeking help, that by delaying their care, there won't be harm.
The Trust has drafted in consultants to cover junior doctors, though it says that's difficult because of Easter holidays. The Doctors' Union argues that patients are already waiting too long, never mind the strike.
I'm sorry to anyone who's had any elective activity that's cancelled because of these strikes, but ultimately it's that growing waiting list which is part of the reason that's driving this dispute. There's over 7 million patients on the waiting list at the moment, and that's only expected to grow because of our workforce crisis.
The government said pay demands were unreasonable and the union should come back to the table with a realistic approach. The dispute continues. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
The mother of the two British-Israeli sisters shot dead in an ambush of their car in the West Bank has died from her injuries. Lucy D, who was 45, had been in a critical condition in hospital following Friday's attack. Our correspondent Lucy Williamson is in Jerusalem tonight. Lucy, tell us more.
Well, Lucy D was evacuated by helicopter from the scene of the attack in a critical condition, and we understand she never regained consciousness. Today, the hospital said that she had died because of her fatal injuries. Yesterday, her husband, Rabbi Leo D, buried their two daughters, both of whom were pronounced dead at the scene of the attack. And he's just given a very emotional statement after this news that his wife has also now died, personal but also political. He talked about the moment he realised his own family had been caught up in this attack. He talked about missing a call from his elder daughter, Maya, and how that would continue to haunt him. But he also had a wider message. He said people needed to differentiate between good and evil. He called on people to avoid moral relativism. And he also urged people to show their support for the family at this time by showing their support for Israel online.
Lucy, thank you. Lucy Williamson. China has carried out what it says is a mock air blockade of Taiwan, using jets carrying live ammunition in the latest escalation of tensions in the South China Sea. The US has sent a destroyer to the area in response. China has condemned that as an illegal incursion. China began a series of military exercises just hours after the Taiwanese president returned from a visit to the United States. Shaima Khalil reports.
A show of force and fury. For the third and final day, China's military continued what it called Operation Joint Sword, aerial and naval blockade drills to seal off the island, and practicing precision strikes on Taiwanese targets. The Chinese army showed this short video of simulated attacks on Taiwan, with missiles fired from land, sea and air into the island's territory. It also confirmed that its aircraft carrier, the Shandong, has taken part in Monday's exercises. Chinese officials said fighter planes loaded with live ammunition had carried out multiple waves of simulated strikes on important targets. These drills were expected. China is infuriated by the Taiwanese president's visit to the US. This is Beijing's promised robust response to what it says was a serious act of collusion. China sees the self-ruled island as part of its territory and insists it should be unified with the mainland, by force if necessary. Today, the Chinese government reiterated its message.
The Taiwan question is for China alone to decide. The biggest threat to peace in the Taiwan Strait is Taiwanese separatism and its support from foreign forces.
In Shanghai, residents voiced their support for the military exercises.
Conducting these drills is a normal thing for China. We need to show the US that we are able to do this. What Taiwan says or thinks isn't important.
We still need to deter Taiwanese separatists. We're also telling the international community that Taiwan is a part of China. These operations are meaningful.
As China displayed a wide array of weapons, the U.S. Navy said its guided missile destroyer Milius performed what Washington called a freedom of navigation operation in the South China Sea, large parts of which are claimed by Beijing. The Chinese government said the U.S. illegally intruded in its waters. China said that its military drills around Taiwan have ended successfully, but there is no end in sight for the tensions between Beijing and Washington and an increasingly unstable Indo-Pacific. Shaima Khalil, BBC News, Tokyo.
The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he makes absolutely zero apologies for an advert which suggests the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been soft on the sentencing of sex offenders. Keir Starmer says he stands by the approach, despite some senior figures in his party publicly distancing themselves from it. Writing in today's Daily Mail, he dismissed claims that he's indulging in gutter politics. Here's our political correspondent, Ian Watson.
A row over this campaign ad, first published just before Easter, has now been resurrected. Labour's suggesting Rishi Sunak personally is content for some sex offenders not to be sent to prison. Keir Starmer took to the pages of the usually Conservative-supporting Daily Mail, saying, "I make absolutely zero apologies for being blunt on this, no matter how squeamish it might make some feel." But hang on a minute, Labour's figures on the number of child sex abusers who are caught by the police but not sent to jail go back to 2010, 5 years before Rishi Sunak became an MP. But for some of this time, as head of the Crown Prosecution Service, Keir Starmer sat in the body that drew up sentencing guidelines.
Primary responsibility of the Sentencing Council is to ensure consistency when it comes to sentencing across the courts across the UK. He was the prosecutor, he was the chief prosecutor in the country. The minimum sentence, the maximum sentence is set by Parliament.
So what's Labour up to? Well, unsurprisingly, crime is a major issue for many voters, especially those that the party needs to win back. And they say they're attacking Rishi Sunak personally because they want to hold him responsible for 13 years of Conservative-led government. Labour's also keen to neutralise any suggestion by opponents that it's soft on crime, but all this is not without risk, as some of the strongest critics are inside Sir Keir's party. The former Home Secretary, Lord Blunkett, has said it was offensive to get down in the gutter to fight politics in this way. And today, the former Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, stated that if there's to be a serious debate on crime, then personal smears and Daily Mail-style distortions shouldn't distract from stating the hard facts. Labour wants the government judged on its entire 13-year record. The Conservatives, too, are willing to go some way back to attack Sir Keir Starmer, claiming at the Crown Prosecution Service he failed to prosecute some of the worst people in Britain. But politically, the Labour leadership's view seems to be there really is no such thing as bad publicity. Ian Watson, BBC News.
It is exactly 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement was signed. The accord in 1998 helped end decades of sectarian violence and restored self-government to Northern Ireland. But more recently, the power-sharing agreement between the Protestant and Catholic communities has been paralysed since the Democratic Unionist Party objected to post-Brexit trading arrangements. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Page is at Stormont tonight. Chris.
Yes, Jane, this holiday weekend has been a time of remembrance and reflection in Northern Ireland. Around 3,500 people died in the conflict known as the Troubles over the course of 3 decades. And the Good Friday Agreement, signed a quarter of a century ago today, is generally seen as the point at which that conflict largely ended. There has been a reminder, even just this afternoon, that the peace isn't perfect. Petrol bombers threw petrol bombs at a stationary police vehicle in Londonderry at the start of a parade organised by dissident Republicans who are opposed to the Good Friday Agreement. Another very obvious difficulty, as you've said, continuing political tensions. Currently, the devolved government, which should be based here at Stormont on the outskirts of Belfast, is not operating. The Democratic Unionist Party is blocking the operation of power sharing because of its objections to trade barriers, as it sees it, between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. So all that said, the leaders who were involved in the Good Friday Agreement 25 years ago and the British and Irish governments have put the emphasis over the last few days on what has been achieved. The fact that political violence, while not unknown, is relatively rare now. And President Biden will be flying into Northern Ireland tomorrow night for a visit.
Chris Page, thank you. At least 5 people have been killed in a shooting in the US state of Kentucky, including a suspected gunman. 8 other people, among them 2 police officers, were taken to hospital after the attack in a bank in Louisville. Police say the suspect was believed to be a former employee of the bank. A boat with 400 migrants on board remains adrift in the Mediterranean off the coast of Malta. The vessel is believed to have run out of fuel, taking on water, and the captain is said to have abandoned ship. There are 2 merchant ships in the area, one of which has been asked to supply fuel, but there's been no attempt at a rescue. The King's journey to Westminster Abbey for his coronation next month will be a little more comfortable than some royal processions. It's been revealed that King Charles and the Queen Consort will ride in the Diamond Jubilee state coach, which has modern suspension and air conditioning, instead of the traditional but notoriously uncomfortable gold state coach. The route to the Abbey has also been revealed, as our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
Less than 4 weeks now to their big day, and preparations for the coronation of King Charles III and the crowning of Camilla as his queen are in full swing. First, the route that will take them from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey and back again has been confirmed. From the Palace, down the Mall to Trafalgar Square, and then down Whitehall, around Parliament Square to the Abbey's west door. The return route will be the same journey in reverse, a much shorter journey than that taken by the late Queen Elizabeth after her coronation. The King and Queen Consort will travel to the coronation in one of the newest royal carriages, the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, escorted by the Household Cavalry.
It's made of aluminium, which is quite unusual for coaches. Most of them are made of wood. And it's also got hydraulic suspension, meaning that the ride is incredibly comfortable, a very modern innovation.
Inside Westminster Abbey, the service itself will see the crown jewels, the regalia, the symbols of the monarch's authority, being used for the first time since Queen Elizabeth was crowned. The sovereign's orb and sceptres, swords, bracelets and spurs, all will have their part in this elaborate religious service, which culminates with the crowning of the monarch with St. Edward's crown. Camilla will be crowned with Queen Mary's crown, which contains some of the Cullinan diamonds. She'll also hold the Queen Consort's rod, which is made of ivory. They will process from the Abbey, just as Queen Elizabeth did, for the return journey to the palace. And for that, they will board this, the 18th century gold state coach. It weighs 4 tons and it's notoriously uncomfortable. The King and Queen may be relieved that their journey back to the palace, escorted by military detachments, will be only a quarter of the length of that undertaken by Queen Elizabeth in 1953. One innovation: the palace has launched a new emoji to mark the coronation. So, a ceremony rooted in history with at least one modern touch. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Now to golf, and Jon Rahm has won the Masters in Augusta. The Spaniard finished 12 shots under par to win by 4 shots, making him the first European to win both that title and the US Open. Our sports correspondent Andy Swiss was watching.
Once again, Spain reigned at Augusta. Jon Rahm roaring to victory after a Masters masterclass. He began the last round 2 behind Brooks Koepka, but following a poor start, the American never recovered. Instead, it was 52-year-old Phil Mickelson that charged into contention. Beginning the final round 10 shots back, he produced a dazzling display to set a testing target. But Rahm isn't one of the world's top players for nothing, and how he held his nerve. With a 4-shot lead on the final hole, he was able to savour the atmosphere before finishing in style.
Jon Rahm is the Masters champion.
On what would have been the birthday of his hero, the late Seve Ballesteros, Rahm had done it, and as he celebrated with his wife and children, his pride was plain to see.
Still really hasn't synced in yet. I'm looking at this course and I'm still thinking I have a couple more holes left to win, and can't really say anything else. You know, this one was for Seve. I know he was up there helping, and help he did.
And so, after Seve Ballesteros, Jose Maria Olazabal and Sergio Garcia, Spain has another Masters champion. And in Jon Rahm, this famous tournament has the worthiest of winners. Andy Swiss, BBC News, Augusta.
Well, that takes us to a look at the weather. Matt Taylor has joined me. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Jane. Lovely sunny starts to this weekend for many, but quite an electrifying end. Some big storm clouds around across the UK today. Look at this spectacular shot in Derbyshire as well. They are now easing away, but over the next 24 to 36 hours, our weather will take a different turn. This area cloud out behind me is a developing area of low pressure. It brings some windy weather. Before it arrives, we're in a slight window of calmer conditions. There will be a few showers continuing through tonight, still some heavy ones at the moment. Parts of southern Scotland, northern England most prone to the showers. Most of them will fade away, and a much cooler night than last night. A little bit on the chilly side, in fact. But gardeners, frost is going to be very, very isolated. Most will be frost-free. And it should be a bright start to tomorrow for many. Make the most of it. There's some cloud and some showers working northwards across Scotland, breaking up, and we'll have the best of the sunshine in the afternoon in the far north. Elsewhere, gradually turning cloudier, wetter to the southwest through the morning, through Wales, Northern Ireland by lunchtime, and then into western parts of England and southwest Scotland. With that, we're going to see some strengthening winds. Now, tomorrow evening could be quite a rough night around some of these western coasts. 50, 60 mile an hour gusts, maybe a little bit more. That will cause some disruption around. Rain will sweep across all parts of the UK, turning to snow over the Scottish mountains as well as this area of low pressure slowly works its way eastwards. But also winds ease temporarily down a little bit into Wednesday morning. They will re-strengthen again. Now, for Wednesday, best of the driest, brightest weather will be eastern areas before we see some showers later on. In the west, though, showers will be fairly frequent, merging into some longer spells of rain. A bit wintry in places on the hills too, and the winds will pick up through the day. Strongest of the winds will be across the southern half of England and Wales. 50, 60 mile an hour gusts. Will be a windy and it will be a cool day for all. But I'll leave you with a bit of better news, Jane. It will turn a bit warmer by this weekend.
Excellent. Matt, thank you very much, Matt Taylor. And that is it from us for now. I'll be back with the late news here on BBC One at 10. Right now, of course, it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news wherever you are tonight. Good night.